Hello everyone! In this video we are going to pick up right where we left off in the previous one. So if you didn't just finish the previous video in the last 30 seconds, you might want to go back and watch the very end of it. Having said that, let's jump right into the action. Here's what I mean. Why don't we adjust this so that the two GetJSON requests can run together at the same time asynchronously? And then only once they both complete do we want to run any of this code. So right now, let's begin coding this new setup. How about right above this current line, we just add a new line and start fresh. So this way we don't immediately need to delete all of our old code. So right inside the beginning of our getResults method, let's say $sign to use jQuery, and it has a method named when. And then right after that, we can chain on then. Now the way that this works is within the parentheses of when, we can include as many JSON requests as we want. And they will all run asynchronously. They will run together at the same time instead of one waiting for the other, and this will speed things up a bit. Now the beauty of the when method is that it's going to babysit all of these different requests, and it's going to watch and wait for them to all complete before it moves on and calls the then method. So then within the parentheses for then, we just say what we want to do once all of our requests have completed. So right now, let's just start building out the skeleton of what we want to do. So within the parentheses for when, we are going to have two JSON requests, and these just get separated by commas. So just as a temporary placeholder, we could say A, comma, B. In reality, each one of these will be a GetJSON request. And then within the parentheses for then, this is where we include an anonymous function that we want to run once all of our data is ready. So to create an anonymous function, we just say function parentheses curly brackets. And then you know me, in between the curly brackets, I like to drop down to a new line. And actually, instead of spelling out the word function here, why don't we use an ES6 arrow function, so that way the function doesn't try to hijack the JavaScript keyword this. So to do that, we can just delete the word function here, but keep the parentheses right after it. And right after the parentheses, just include =, greater than. Now the beauty of combining when with then is we can include parameter names within these new empty parentheses. You can make up whatever names you want. Just as a test, you could say 1, 2. And the when then combo is going to automatically map the results of this GET request to this parameter. And it's going to map the results from this GET request to this parameter. And if you had a third request or a fourth request, well, then you could just include matching parameters here. Now again, these names do not matter. It's just as simple as this first item will be matched with this first parameter, the second item with this second parameter. Now again, we're only going to have two, so let me delete those. So for example, in just a minute from now, we are going to get rid of these placeholders A and B, and we're going to replace them with the actual GetJSON requests to the posts and pages URLs. So with that in mind, why don't we change our parameter names here? Instead of 1, we could say posts, and instead of 2, we could say pages. And now the raw JSON data that WordPress sends back will live within these parameter names. And we can access them within the body of our function here. And then we would just want to go ahead and combine these two, and then output them into HTML onto the page. Now we've already done exactly that down here. So why don't we just cut and paste this code into our new section. So I'm going to begin selecting from this line where we create a variable named combined results. And let's select down to the isSpinnerVisible line. So let's just cut that and then paste it right here. And now all we need to do is include real GetJSON requests here instead of the placeholder A and B. So instead of A, let's say $.getJSON parentheses, and then let's do the same thing for B, $.getJSON parentheses. And in order to maintain some sanity, I like to break down each one of these onto their own line. So right after the opening when parentheses and right before this $sign here, why don't we just drop down And then in between the two getJSON requests, we can also drop down. And then after this final getJSON request and its parentheses, we can also drop down again. Okay, now let's just go ahead and fill out the getJSON requests. Now, normally you would want to give the getJSON method at least 2 arguments, right? The first argument is the URL that you want to send a request to, and then the second argument is a function that you want to run once the server responds. However, in this case, since we've got the when method that's babysitting these requests, and it's going to automatically pass on their results as parameters into our then method, since that's the case, we don't even need to provide a callback function for each getJSON request. So we only need to pass them one argument, and that is the URL that we want to send a request to. Now, instead of typing out that URL again, let's just go down here and copy and paste it. So I'm going to begin selecting from the beginning of this university data and scroll all the way to the right and include the this search field .val and the parentheses. So just right up before this comma, let's copy that. And then back up in our new code, let's get rid of the X placeholder and paste in our clipboard. And then we can do the same thing for the second getJSON request and just change posts to pages. All right, now before we save this, we just have one more thing we need to take care of. Down on this line of code where we are combining the results, when we first wrote this line of code, we were still using the callback function that the getJSON method supplies. And in that case, the only thing that's going to live in these parameters of posts and pages is the actual WordPress JSON data. However, now that these parameters are coming from the when-then combo, they contain a little bit more than just the WordPress JSON data. They also contain information about the JSON request itself, like whether it succeeded or failed. So down on this line where we are trying to combine posts with pages, instead of just working with the posts parameter itself, let's tack onto it and say square brackets 0. So that way we are only working with the first item in its array. In this case, the first item is the actual JSON data itself, and the other items in the array are the information about whether it succeeded or failed. Okay, so then we can just do the same thing with pages. So right after pages, square brackets 0. Perfect. Now at this point, we can go ahead and delete our old code that we are no longer using. So that begins with the getJSON line and ends with curly bracket, parenthesis, semicolon. So we can delete that. And then go ahead and give this a save. And if I try to search for lorem, as in lorem ipsum again, perfect. Everything still works, and now the experience should be a little bit faster for the visitors of the site. Now before we bring this lesson to a close, let's do a tiny bit of error handling. So for example, what if there's a network or internet connection problem, or one of our URLs is slightly misspelled? Right? So maybe after WP-JSON, if I add in some gibberish, that's obviously going to throw an error, but we don't want our script to just explode. We want to be able to detect that there's a problem and still output a little bit of text to the user that says, unexpected error, please try again. So to make that happen, here's what we can do. It all has to do with the then method. So here's the opening parentheses for then, and down here is the closing parentheses for then. Now at the moment, our then method only has a single argument, which is this anonymous function. However, we can give it a second argument, which will be used if it detects an error. So down on this line, right after the closing curly bracket, we can just say comma and provide another argument. Let's just give it an anonymous function. So parentheses and then arrow symbol and then curly brackets. And if there's an error, why don't we just target the results div, so this results div, and adjust its HTML. And we can just create a paragraph that says, unexpected error, please try again. Okay, now if I save this and leave in this gibberish in the URL that's going to throw an error, if I try to search, perfect. Unexpected error, please try again. So at the very least, we can rest assured knowing that our script is never going to just outright explode and break down. So let's get rid of that and put it back to the correct URL, and we are in business. we can search to our heart's content. That's going to bring this lesson to a close. In our next lesson, we will learn more about customizing the WordPress REST API. Let's keep it rolling, and I will see you then.